start this evening, so you all know, is I'm going to give a little bit of background on river herring. I'm going to talk about our efforts to restore river herring habitats and how that ties into our volunteer monitoring program, and tell you guys what you can do to help us search for spawning alewife. And after I'm done, we have some maps on the table. We have an online map. All of the people, the staff around the room are here to help you pick out a site or 2 sites, however many you want to do, to go look for spawning alewife. So that's what we'll do after I'm done telling you a little bit about the survey. So river herring are a diadramus fish species, and the Greek roots of the word diadramus is through running. These are fish that migrate between fresh and salt waters, and there are 2 types of diadramus fish. You have catadromous fish. These are fish that spend most of their lives in fresh waters and migrate out to sea to breed. An example of this is the American eel. The second type is anadromous fish. So these have the opposite life cycle. These are fish that spend most of their lives at sea and then migrate to fresh waters to breed. Examples of this include Atlantic sturgeon, striped bass, American shad, and the river herring, which is the star of tonight. So river herring is actually the collective term for 2 species of fish that look very much alike, the alewife and the blueback herring. These guys are pretty hard to tell apart, but the alewife do have larger eyes and a more compressed body. And on Long Island, alewife are the more common species and have been the focus of our restoration and monitoring efforts. So a little bit about alewife. Their native range is from the Carolinas to Maine and then up to Newfoundland. These are fairly small fish. They only grow to about 1 foot. They reach sexual maturity at about 3 to 5 years, and they have a lifespan of 8 to 10 years. And so as I mentioned, these guys are an anadromous fish. They spend most of their lives out in the ocean, but in late winter or early spring, they will begin to migrate toward the coasts and come into the estuaries and eventually make their way up into freshwater rivers and streams, which is where they breed. And the trigger for their migrations into fresh waters is change in water temperatures. Generally, it needs to be at least 48 degrees. River herring prefer, or alewife prefer, slower moving, calm waters. So the habitats, streams and rivers on Long Island provide great habitat for them. They typically are coming into our rivers and streams from the beginning of March to mid-May. So that's going to be kind of our target period for monitoring. So after alewife breed, the adults will generally head right back downstream and head back out to the ocean. But the young will remain in the fresh waters for the first few months of their lives. And these guys do grow pretty quickly, and as they grow, they will start to head out to the estuaries and hang out there for a little bit. And then by the time they reach 1 year old, they've made it back to the ocean to join herring schools. Once they then reach maturity at about 3 to 5 years, they will make their first spawning run back to or near the same stream that they were born in, which is pretty cool. So alewife and other diadramus fish play a pretty significant role in our coastal and marine ecosystems. Alewife can help to filter the water, and they are also a very important food source for a number of fish species, migratory birds, and mammals. When they're out in the ocean, they're fed on by tunas and whales. Once they move into the estuaries, they're prey for things like striped bass and bluefish and seals. And then in the rivers, they're a very important food source for a number of migratory birds and also mammals, including sea otters and raccoons. And the predators of alewife, in turn, support a lot of significant commercial and recreational fisheries, the seafood industry, and ecotourism. So having a healthy alewife population is very important to ensure we have healthy ecosystems and to ensure that we have thriving coastal economies. Unfortunately, though, the alewife have been declining and are currently at a pretty low abundance. These guys did actually once support a significant commercial and recreational fisheries, but catches, which is shown in this graph on the right, have declined significantly since the mid-1900s. The decline is due to a couple of things. One is overfishing and bycatch when they're out in the ocean. And when I say bycatch, what I mean is that while the alewife themselves are not being targeted, they are being caught in fisheries that are aimed at other species. Out in the ocean, the commercial fisheries are using these giant nets that are several football fields in length. So as you can imagine, those nets kind of scoop up anything in its path and can scoop up quite a number of fish. The second problem for them is loss of their critical freshwater breeding habitat. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, dams were built on pretty much all of Long Island's tributaries and tributaries throughout the region, blocking access, blocking the migratory routes of alewife and other diagonous fish, and essentially cutting them off from hundreds of acres of critical freshwater habitat. So on Long Island, a coalition of non-governmental and governmental agencies has gathered together to form what's called the Long Island Diagonous Fish Work Group. And this work group has been working really hard to restore that access to freshwater habitat for alewife and other diagonous fish. And there are a couple ways to go about doing this. One is we can remove the migratory barriers, so remove the dams. That's not always possible though, and can be met, everyone is not always worried about what the changes might be if you remove that dam, so they may not be in favor of that. So another option is to install fish passages so that the fish can go over, around, or through the dam. And I'm showing you a couple examples here in these pictures. The one on the left is on the Carmans River on Hards Lake, and that was the first permanent fish passage structure installed on Long Island. The one on the right is also on the Carmans River at Upper Lake, and that one was actually just recently installed last year. Those are just a couple of examples though. There are fish passage restoration projects going on across Long Island, and Seatuck Environmental Association has been working really hard to create this nice online interactive map that shows where fish passage projects on Long Island have been completed and habitat has been restored, and also where barriers remain and where we still need to do fish passage projects. And the little fish symbols that you see around the map are places where we have confirmed alewife sightings. So we know alewife are coming into those tributaries. Along with this map, Seatuck, in conjunction with the Peconic Estuary Program and other estuary programs on Long Island, created a Long Island Diagonous Fish Restoration Strategy. So that strategy is basically outlines what we're doing to restore diagonous fish habitat on Long Island and set some restoration goals. That strategy is the final draft, I believe, is going to be released very soon and is going to be available on Seatuck's website. So if you're interested, you can check that out. This map is also on their website, and the link is actually on the handout that's at your guys' tables if you want to check that out. So I also want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the Peconic Estuary Watershed, which is where we are right now. That's what it doesn't have. One of my slides. Okay, that's okay. This is a slightly different version of my presentation. Had some technical difficulties. But anyways, the Peconic, so in the Peconic watershed, we have the two largest alewife spawning runs on Long Island. One is at Alewife Creek in Southampton, and the other is the Peconic River, which is what this map is showing right here. The run at Alewife Creek there's no major barriers, and it's actually one of the only tributaries on Long Island without any major barriers. So that's probably why it's the largest run. But unlike Alewife Creek on the Peconic River, this river was heavily impounded, and until very recently, there were actually 6 dams along this river, blocking upstream and downstream migration for alewife and other diagonous fish. But we have completed 2 fish passage restoration projects on the Peconic River. The first was completed in 2010 at the Grangeville Park Dam, and a nature-like fishway or rock ramp was put in there, and that's being shown in that top picture there. So that's what it looks like, and it's just around the corner here if you guys ever want to go check it out. And this fishway has been very successful. We currently estimate that about 50 to 80,000 spawning alewives are using that fishway each year. So that's really great. The second completed fish passage project is further upstream on the Bycatch River. And I should say, so the completed ones are noted by those green triangles on that map there. So Grangeville is the first one at the head of the Bycatch River, and the next one is further upstream at Edwards Avenue Dam. And a picture of that is on the bottom picture there. That dam was failing, so they did some repairs to the dam, and at the same time, they put in a Alaska Sea Pass fish ladder there for the alewife. And they also put in, that's on the right side of that picture, and they also put in a separate American eel pass to also help American eel get over the dam, and that's on the left side of the picture. So those are the two completed fish passage projects, but we are working on fish passage restoration projects at all of the other sites on the Bycatch River, with the exception of the most upstream barrier. And the next fish passage that should be coming very soon is at the Woodhole Dam, and that is on Little River, which is the first major tributary to the Bycatch River. And this fish passage project is very important because currently the majority of the fish that are using that Grangeville fishway seem to go up Little River, and they congregate just below Woodhole Dam in a stalled effort to go any farther. And I have a little video here to show you what all of those fish look like congregating below the dam. So Bycatch Estuary Program, in conjunction with Suffolk County Parks, who's the owner of the dam, have received funding to do construction of a fish passage project here. So hopefully that is going to be coming within the next year or two. And while we're talking about this, I want to mention that we are going to be having an event on April 21st for World Fish Migration Day and Earth Day at this Woodhole Dam. And if you would like to come to that event, you'll be able to see live alewife, most likely. And you can help us collect some biological data on the alewife, and you can learn a little bit more about our restoration efforts. So now to the reason you guys are here for our monitoring program. The monitoring program is really important part of our restoration efforts because it helps us to know where alewife are on Long Island and where we need to do restoration, and it also helps us to monitor the success of those fish passage projects that I was talking about that have been put in and completed. So how this survey works is volunteers like yourselves go out and look for alewife that are migrating or spawning in Long Island's tributaries during the spring. So the target dates are March 1st through May 30th. And our goals of the survey are essentially to document where alewife spawning runs are taking place, when alewife are coming into our tributaries, and if we can, to get a rough estimate of the size of the alewife spawning runs. And then, as I mentioned, it's really important for us helping to find new places where alewife are that we haven't found before, and for monitoring the success of those fish passage projects. And just to give you a little bit from the 2017 efforts, we had a total of 37 volunteers. There were likely more, but those were the volunteers that actually submitted data through our online data submission form. And we had a total of 331 submissions, and the volunteers were able to monitor information from 47 sites across Long Island. So that's pretty great. And 5 new alewife spawning runs were actually found. So we're hoping that in 2018 we can expand those efforts and find some additional new runs. So where do you want to survey? Typically you want to survey on bridges that are downstream, just downstream of the first impassable barrier. Ideally, you want it to be a place where the flow is a little bit constricted and where the water is clear and shallow, so that way it's easier to see the fish in the water. And the map that I'm showing you here is just a map of some of the locations around the Bycatch Estuary that we've identified that as places we'd like volunteers to go and check out to look for spawning alewife. And I have some other larger maps over there on the tables and some maps of some of these key sites that show you exactly where to go. So again, once I'm done here, we'll take a look at those maps. If you're outside of the Peconic watershed, don't worry. We can pull up that online map, and there are plenty of people in the room that know other sites to go monitor outside the estuary. So we'll help you find something close to where you live or where you work that's going to be convenient to you. So when do you want to survey? If you can survey at fairly regular intervals, that's the best. You know, maybe that's once a week, maybe that's twice a week. The more you can survey, obviously, the better. But anything that you can do is great. We will take. So, you know, just do what you can. We greatly appreciate that. It's best to go on a day when the visibility is going to be good. You're going to have light and you're going to be able to see into that water. But you also want to keep in mind that you may want to check out your monitoring site during different times of the day and under different conditions, because alewife can be a little bit elusive, and you know, at some of these sites they seem to be coming into the tributaries at night, and other places they're coming in during the day. So monitoring at different times gives us some other valuable information. So when you get to your site, you want to find a place where you can see into the water and minimize glare. Polarized lenses are also very helpful. And you want to keep in mind that the alewife are adapted to blending into their environment, so they can't be seen by predators. So you need to be a little bit patient and just aware of that. And I have a picture on the next slide to show you that. But basically, if you can observe the area for 15 minutes, that's ideal. And you want to look for movement or for schooling fish in the water. And so this is the slide. You can see on the left, the alewife are kind of blending into their background, and they're a little bit hard to see. On the right, they're a little bit easier to see against that lighter background. So just be aware of that. And then I have a video, another video here. This is alewife at Sunken Meadow on the north shore of Long Island. And these are great viewing conditions because it's very clear. The water's shallow, and you can clearly see the fish in the water here. When you go out to your site, do be aware that you may come across other fish species besides alewife. So before you go out, try to get a good idea of what alewife look like and what you're looking for. A few other species that you might encounter are the brook trout. These guys are sort of an olivey green color, and they may have some markings or spots on them. And they tend to remain in the same place, whereas alewife will tend to move around a little bit more. So that may help you distinguish them as well. Another species you might encounter is the carp. The carp is a bit larger than alewife. It also has a very long dorsal fin, and that's that top fin that goes all the way across their back, and they have barbels. So it's another species you might run into. It's also possible you might encounter Atlantic menhaden. Generally, Atlantic menhaden are not a freshwater fish, but they can occasionally get pushed into freshwaters by their predators. If you see a very large school of fish, it may actually be menhaden. These guys tend to have a yellowish tint, so that may help you to distinguish them from alewife. They also have, you know, rounder bodies and larger heads. Other things to look for when you are out at your site are alewife scales on the stream banks. If you do see scales, they are most likely from the alewife, and it probably means the alewife got snatched by a predator. And that means that alewife were present at your site. Another sign, potential sign of alewife is lurking predators. So just keep that in mind when you're out there. Okay, so what do we want you to record and how to record it? CTUC has developed an online data sheet. The URL is up there, but it's also on that handout that I provided you. So when you go out to your site, you can bookmark this link on your phone. You can go out to your site, and when you get there, you can just pull up this link, and you can enter in the information right there. If you prefer, you can print out the data sheet and write everything down, and then come back and enter it in later. You can mail us the data sheets if you want. We're open to getting the information any type of way that's easiest for you. But the things that the data sheet is going to ask you are what is the name of the site, so where are you monitoring at, the date and the time. It's going to ask you the tidal stage. If you don't know what the, is the tide coming in, is it going out? If you don't know that information, that's fine, just skip it. There is a place to enter water temperature. If you do have a thermometer and you feel like monitoring the water temperature and can do so safely at your site, that's great, but definitely not required. That's not the most important thing. So if not, don't worry about that. You can enter in some general information about the weather conditions. Most importantly, though, what we want to know is whether alewives are present or not at your site. And again, if you see live fish, or if you see the scales on the stream banks, then that we want you to enter alewives were present at your site. The next question, if you say alewives were present, it's going to ask you for an approximate count of how many. Don't stress too much about that, but just give us your best guess. Are you seeing 1 fish or 10 fish or 50 fish? Whatever you think it looks like to you, that just gives us a rough idea of how many fish might be there. There's also a notes section, so in that section you can enter in any other important information you think you want to tell us, other species you saw, anything interesting at your site. You can also take pictures and upload pictures, so there's a lot of different things you can do. Please remember, though, that safety is very important and the #1 priority, so please be smart when you're monitoring. If you have a buddy that you can go with, that's great. If not, just make sure someone knows where you are, and don't go anywhere where it seems a little sketchy. We don't want you doing that. We want you to be safe, okay? If you have any concerns or questions while you're at your site or any time during this monitoring process, you can feel free to call or email me. My contact information is on the handout. Enrico Nardone, he's the Executive Director of CTEC. His contact information is also on the handout, so you can reach out to him as well. And if you just want to email us to show us a picture that you took at your site, or because you're excited that you saw fish, we appreciate that as well. So feel free to email us anytime. And I will probably, if you leave your email on the sign-in sheet, I will probably email you a couple times throughout the spring monitoring season and just give you some words of encouragement or ask how it's going or something like that. So if you don't want to hear from me, don't put your email down, but hopefully that's all right. So I think that's it. Is there anything I missed, Byron?
Nope.
Okay. Okay.